What if I told you that some of the battles in your life aren't happening in your mind or your job or your relationships, but in the spiritual atmosphere around you? And what if I told you that the solution isn't louder prayers or longer fasting, but a simple, humble physical act that unlocks spiritual authority? Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt blocked for no clear reason? Like you're trying your hardest, but something invisible keeps pulling you backward? That's not random. That's what happens when spiritual resistance goes unchallenged. And from January 24 to 31, you're being invited into a reset, not a superstition, not a ritual for show, a statement of power. Because when you soak your feet with intention, you're saying, I choose cleansing, I choose humility, I choose freedom. In the Bible, feet represent direction, authority, and territory. Where your feet go, your life follows. So when you soak them, you're declaring, every step from here forward is blessed. Symbolic action is powerful because human beings don't just think with their minds, they think with their bodies, their emotions, and their habits. When you do something physical with intention, your mind takes it seriously. Soaking your feet is not about water having magic powers, it's about what your body learns through the action. In many spiritual and psychological traditions, the body is used as a language. Kneeling, bowing, washing, standing still, or walking forward all tell your subconscious something important. When you soak your feet, you are slowing down, lowering yourself, and choosing a posture of humility and reflection. That posture communicates, I am ready to release what I've been carrying. Feet represent movement, direction, and progress. They touch the ground first before the rest of you moves. So when you focus on your feet, you are focusing on where your life is going next. The act becomes a way of telling your mind, I'm changing direction. Symbolic actions also break emotional patterns. If you've been anxious, angry, or stuck, your body is often locked into those states. A calm, deliberate act interrupts that loop. The water becomes a signal for reset, like pressing a mental restart button. Over time, your brain links the action with clarity and peace. That's how rituals work, not by superstition, but by repetition with meaning. Soaking your feet with intention creates a moment where you stop reacting and start choosing. You are no longer just hoping for change, you are physically participating in it. Your mind responds to that participation by opening up to new beliefs and new outcomes. The action says, I'm done carrying old energy into new spaces. It trains you to associate stillness with power, humility with authority, and quiet moments with realignment, which is why symbolic action feels small on the outside but creates a shift on the inside that continues to influence how you think, decide, and move forward in your life every day. You repeat it with awareness and purpose. A spiritual reset is about deliberately pausing the old momentum of your life and choosing a new one with awareness and intention. The idea behind January 24th to 31 as a focused window is not that the dates themselves are mystical, but that a defined period creates psychological and spiritual clarity. When you mark out a specific time, your mind treats it as significant. It stops drifting and starts paying attention. That's what a reset really is, attention. For many people, life runs on autopilot. Days blur together, habits repeat, and emotional patterns go unchallenged. A reset interrupts that flow. It gives you permission to stop carrying yesterday into today. In spiritual terms, it's a moment of alignment, where you step out of reaction and into intention. When you commit to a short, clear window, like a week, your nervous system relaxes because the task feels manageable. You're not trying to change your whole life forever. You're choosing to show up differently for a defined season. That focus creates depth. Instead of scattered prayers, thoughts, or efforts, everything funnels into one purpose: release and realignment. A reset also works because it combines time and meaning. Time alone passes whether you're conscious or not, but meaning gives time direction. By setting aside these days, you are telling your inner world, this matters. That activates discipline and expectancy. You start noticing what needs to go, what needs to heal, and what needs to shift. Emotionally, a reset helps you detach from old stories about yourself. Spiritually, it opens space for new identity. You stop defining yourself by what you've been through and start defining yourself by where you're choosing to go. A focused window doesn't limit transformation, it concentrates it. It turns vague desire into deliberate movement. Instead of waiting for life to change you, you begin changing how you meet life during those days with awareness, clarity, and responsibility for the direction your thoughts, prayers, actions, and beliefs are taking you into next. Faith over fear is about which voice you choose to let lead your decisions. Fear is reactive. It's based on what might go wrong, what you've seen fail before, and what you don't control. Faith is responsive. It's based on trust, expectation, and the belief that something higher than your circumstances is at work. When people talk about curses, blocks, or negative patterns, fear often gives those things power, not because they are strong, but because fear makes the mind hyper-focused on threat. Your brain then looks for evidence to support that fear, and suddenly every delay, every disappointment, every closed door feels like proof that something is against you. Faith does the opposite. Faith doesn't deny difficulty, but it refuses to let difficulty define reality. It shifts your attention from what's happening to what's possible. When you choose faith, you stop asking, what if this goes wrong? And start asking, what if this is working for me in ways I can't see yet? That change in question changes your emotional state, your behavior, and your interpretation of events. Fear contracts you. It makes you cautious, guarded, and small. Faith expands you. It makes you curious, bold, and open. In spiritual language, faith is alignment with truth instead of illusion. The illusion says you are powerless. The truth says you have authority over what you agree with internally. When you believe that light, clarity, and purpose are stronger than confusion, darkness, and limitation, your mind stops cooperating with negativity. You no longer give emotional energy to what tries to intimidate you. Instead of shrinking back, you step forward with calm confidence. Faith doesn't mean pretending everything is perfect. It means choosing not to let fear write the story of your life. It's the decision to trust direction, even when the path isn't fully visible. When faith leads, you stop living in survival mode and start living in alignment mode, where your thoughts, emotions, and actions come from inner stability instead of external pressure. And your sense of power comes from knowing that what's guiding you is greater than what's trying to stop you. An intentional ritual is about transforming an ordinary action into a meaningful experience through focus, awareness, and purpose. Without intention, actions are just habits. You wake up, walk, talk, eat, scroll, repeat. With intention, those same actions become messages you send to your mind and inner world. When you do something deliberately, your brain treats it differently. It stops running on autopilot and starts paying attention. That's the difference between randomly sitting in water and consciously soaking your feet with meaning. Intention is what turns motion into direction. When you decide why you're doing something before you do it, you're programming your attention. Your mind begins to look for alignment between your actions and your beliefs. This creates coherence inside you. Instead of your thoughts going one way and your behavior going another, everything starts moving together. A ritual works because it gives structure to your inner life. It creates a container for emotion, reflection, and choice. When you repeat the same action with the same meaning, your nervous system starts to associate that action with a certain mental and emotional state. Over time, the act itself becomes a trigger for clarity, calm, or confidence. That's not magic, that's conditioning with awareness. The water doesn't change you, but your interpretation of the moment does. By choosing to be present, you're telling your subconscious, "This matters." And the subconscious always listens to what you treat as important. Intentional ritual also slows time down. In a world that pushes speed and distraction, choosing to pause is an act of power. You step out of reaction mode and into response mode. You stop being dragged by the day and start leading yourself through it. The mind begins to release noise when it knows there's a safe, focused space to unload it. A ritual gives your thoughts somewhere to land. It becomes a boundary between what you've been carrying and what you're ready to let go of. It also builds identity. Every time you show up for a ritual, you're reinforcing the story that you are someone who chooses awareness over chaos, purpose over drift. That story becomes your self-image, and your self-image quietly shapes everything you do. When an action is intentional, it trains you to listen to yourself. It reconnects you with your ability to choose instead of just react. The repetition strengthens trust between you and your inner direction. You begin to recognize your own authority in small moments, which makes it easier to stand in it during bigger ones. An intentional ritual is not about performance or superstition. It's about creating a living conversation between your actions and your beliefs, where your body, mind, and focus are no longer moving separately, but operating as one aligned system in real time. If this resonates with you, if you feel this in your spirit, type "I claim my freedom" in the comments right now. And share this with someone who's been stuck too long. Alignment with Scripture, in this context, means letting spiritual truth shape your understanding of power, freedom, and identity, instead of letting circumstances do it. Scripture consistently presents God as the one who breaks chains, restores dignity, and redefines people who feel trapped. When you align with that, you're not just reading words, you're agreeing with a higher narrative about who you are and what's possible for your life. The idea that God breaks chains is not passive. It's not about waiting for something to happen while you stay the same. It's about responding to that truth with obedience, trust, and action. Obedience is what activates belief. When you act on what you say you believe, your faith moves from theory into experience. Scripture becomes real when it's practiced, not just quoted. When you choose to align with it, you're saying that divine authority is greater than inherited patterns, fear-based thinking, and limiting stories. That alignment shifts your inner posture. Instead of seeing yourself as someone under pressure, you begin to see yourself as someone under guidance. The chains Scripture talks about are not only external problems, but internal agreements with shame, fear, and helplessness. When you align with truth, those agreements start to dissolve. You stop partnering with thoughts that say you're stuck or cursed or powerless. You begin to partner with thoughts that say you're seen, guided, and capable of change. Alignment also requires humility. It means letting something higher than your emotions lead you. Sometimes your feelings say one thing, but Scripture points to another. Choosing alignment is choosing direction over impulse. It trains you to respond instead of react. Over time, that creates stability. You're no longer tossed around by moods or circumstances. You're rooted in a deeper sense of purpose and order. Obedience in this sense is not about control, but about cooperation. You cooperate with a truth that is larger than your momentary state. That cooperation brings clarity. You start to recognize when a thought is out of alignment and when an action is. You become more intentional about what you agree with internally. When scripture becomes your reference point, your life stops being defined by what happens to you and starts being defined by how you interpret and respond to it. Your sense of freedom grows because you're no longer waiting for the world to change before you do. You're letting truth change you first, and that shift quietly reshapes how you walk, decide, and move forward in every area of your life. Consistency is what turns a meaningful idea into a lived reality. One powerful moment can inspire you, but repeated moments are what actually rewire you. When you do something once, it feels symbolic. When you do it again and again, it becomes part of who you are. The mind learns through repetition. Every time you return to the same intentional act, you strengthen the mental and emotional pathways connected to it. That's how awareness becomes automatic. At first, you have to remind yourself to be present, to reflect, to release. Over time, your system begins to expect it. Consistency creates trust between you and your own intentions. You start believing yourself when you say you're going to show up. That builds self-respect. Without consistency, even the best ideas stay theoretical. With it, they become embodied. Discipline is not about force, it's about relationship. You're teaching your nervous system that you are safe to slow down, to reflect, and to choose differently. When you repeat a practice, your mind stops seeing it as effort and starts seeing it as normal. That's powerful because what feels normal no longer feels threatening. Many people want change but resist the process that creates it. Consistency is the bridge between desire and identity. Each time you return to the practice, you reinforce the message that your growth matters more than your excuses. You also build spiritual and emotional awareness through repetition. The more often you pause, reflect, and realign, the more sensitive you become to what's off and what's aligned. You start noticing subtle shifts in your thoughts, reactions, and energy. That awareness helps you correct your course early instead of waiting until you're overwhelmed. Consistency also stabilizes you. Life is unpredictable, but your response doesn't have to be. When you have a regular anchor, you're less likely to spiral when something goes wrong. You return to what centers you. Over time, the practice becomes less about the act itself and more about the state it brings you into. You no longer do it to fix something. You do it to stay connected to clarity. That's when growth stops feeling like work and starts feeling like maintenance of a new standard you've set for yourself. The repetition shapes your identity quietly. You begin to see yourself as someone who shows up, who reflects, who chooses alignment over chaos, and that identity influences every decision you make without you having to think about it consciously anymore. An identity shift is the movement from seeing yourself as someone things happen to into someone who participates in what happens. When a person lives in the mindset of a victim, life feels like something that is done to them. Circumstances, people, history, and mistakes all become sources of power over their emotions and decisions. The inner language sounds like, "I can't, I'm stuck, this always happens to me." That way of seeing yourself quietly limits what you believe is possible. A victim mindset is not about pretending nothing hurts or goes wrong. It's about recognizing that even when something happens to you, it does not get to define you. The shift happens when you stop asking, "Why does this keep happening to me?" and start asking, "What am I choosing in response to this?" That question changes everything. You move from helplessness into responsibility, and responsibility is where power lives. When you see yourself as a victor, you stop waiting for permission to grow. You stop waiting for life to become easy before you become strong. Your focus moves from what you lack to what you can develop. This shift is internal before it is external. Nothing around you has to change first for your identity to change. The moment you decide you are not your past, not your pain, and not your patterns, you create space for a new version of yourself to act. A victim mindset looks backward for reasons. A victim mindset looks forward for direction. One keeps you tied to explanations. The other moves you toward transformation. When your identity changes, your behavior follows. You speak differently. You set different boundaries. You stop tolerating what you used to excuse. You don't abandon your emotions, but you stop letting them lead your life. Instead of reacting, you begin responding. Instead of shrinking, you begin standing. Instead of surviving, you begin choosing. That is the real meaning of moving from victim to victor. It's not about dominance over others. It's about mastery over yourself, over your thoughts, your reactions, and the meaning you assign to what happens. Once you shift your identity, your circumstances eventually have to catch up, because you are no longer moving through life as someone waiting to be rescued, but as someone who knows they are allowed to rise. Community energy is the effect created when people move with shared intention, shared focus, and shared belief. Human beings are not isolated systems. We are deeply influenced by the emotional and psychological atmosphere around us. When you're alone, your mind negotiates with doubt more easily. When you're with others who are aligned in purpose, your mind borrows confidence from the group. That's not weakness. That's how collective motivation works. When many people direct attention toward the same goal, the sense of possibility increases. You stop feeling like it's just you against the world. You start feeling part of something larger than your own effort. That shift changes how your nervous system responds to challenge. Instead of tightening into fear, it opens into participation. Community creates momentum. One person's clarity strengthens another person's courage. One person's consistency encourages another person's discipline. Emotion spreads, focus spreads, expectation spreads. When a group commits to the same practice, the action stops feeling strange or lonely and starts feeling normal and supported. That removes internal resistance. You're more likely to show up when you know others are showing up too. Not because of pressure, but because of belonging. Belonging is one of the strongest motivators in human psychology. It tells your brain you're safe to grow. It tells your identity you're not alone in becoming someone new. Community energy also amplifies meaning. When you hear others talk about what they're releasing, what they're learning, what they're stepping into, it gives language to things you may have only felt vaguely before. You recognize yourself in other people's experiences. That reflection deepens your awareness. You become more honest with yourself because you see that growth is normal, not exceptional. The group becomes a mirror that helps you see both your potential and your patterns more clearly. There is also accountability in community, even when it's gentle. When others are committed, your excuses sound smaller in your own ears. You start choosing alignment not because you're forced, but because you're inspired. The collective focus creates a rhythm. Everyone moving together creates a sense of flow that is hard to create alone. When many people engage the same intention over the same period, the practice stops being an isolated act and becomes a shared experience. That shared experience carries emotional weight. It feels real. It feels supported. It feels alive. Community energy doesn't replace personal responsibility. It strengthens it. It reminds you that transformation is not a private fantasy, but a lived process that people everywhere are engaging with at the same time. When many minds agree on the direction of change, resistance weakens and movement becomes easier because you're no longer pushing alone. You're moving inside a current that's already going forward. So as you come to the end of this message, remember that nothing here is about superstition or fear. It's about choice, awareness, and alignment. You're not being asked to escape your life, but to engage it differently through symbolic action, focused time, faith over fear, intentional ritual, alignment with truth, consistency, identity shift, and community energy. You're being invited to move from drifting to deciding, from reacting to leading yourself. This is about stepping out of old agreements with limitation and stepping into a new agreement with purpose. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're ready to stop letting the past define your direction. Real change doesn't start with the world changing. It starts with you choosing to show up with clarity, humility, and courage. When you do that, your actions begin to match your beliefs. Your beliefs begin to match your identity, and your identity begins to shape your future. This is your moment to stop waiting for freedom and start walking in it, knowing that every intentional step you take from here forward is building a life that reflects who you truly are becoming.